All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about a topic that's hopefully very relevant to many of you. I know from just glancing through the roster that many of you have either already turned 18 or you're on the cusp of turning 18 sometime over the next few months. And that is the topic of voting, specifically voting in the upcoming election on November 3rd. Now, even if you're somebody that is unable to vote by that point due to your birth date, hopefully some of what we talk about today will be stuff that you can remember, or you can use these resources at a later time to hopefully get yourself registered and ready to go to exercise your civic responsibility. Now, the thing that kind of got me thinking about putting this lesson together in the first place that always shocks me is that, overwhelmingly voter participation rates in the United States are very low, especially compared to many other democratic nations. According to this Pew Research study from this past year, current voter participation is roughly 55.7%. So what that means is that anybody of voting eligibility from 18 years old and older in the United States, only a little bit more than half of us actually vote on a regular basis. Now that said, one caveat there, one kind of asterisk to that statistic is that we do see that typically in presidential elections, like the upcoming one, voter participation is generally higher. And then typically what we see during what are called midterm elections or off-year elections is that typically those dip down, and then primary elections tend to be even lower in terms of the amount of people that actually turn out to vote. Now, I also thought it's just kind of an interesting side note to get us started here. I brought up the point that, there are a lot of countries out there in the world that actually do mandate voting. That if you're a citizen over the age of 18 or 21 or whatever the age is, if you don't actually register and show up to vote, oftentimes it's enforced with some kind of fine. That you are required to show up and cast the ballot. I made an interesting note here. One country I came across that I didn't know about, prior to doing research on the subject, was in the country of Belgium. They don't fine you if you don't vote, but if you don't vote, you cannot get a government related job whatsoever. Something as basic as even, if you want to work at the DMV handing out driver's licenses, you are not eligible for government related employment unless you have like a spotless voting record. So that actually tends to promote their rates more than fines or any other kind of negative incentive. And then finally, this chart down here I thought was kind of interesting. It actually shows, even though with compulsory voting in many countries, you can see it kind of mirrors participation rate here in the United States. Like, many people just simply don't vote and pay the fine because, hey, it's not worth it to me. So you see the difference is only about 7%. So you're still talking, under another 30% of the population just simply deciding not to vote. Now, the thing that, again, I thought was so shocking, though, about that statistic about voter participation in the United States is to register to vote specifically here in Pennsylvania is insanely easy. That any of you that are about to turn 18 or are 18, you literally could do this in 5 minutes right now at your house. To register to vote in Pennsylvania, you basically have to have three things. You have to be 18, at least for this upcoming one, by November 3rd. So let's say your birth date's on November 2nd. You can register to vote right now. Myself, my birthday is on October 30th. And I remember the year that I turned 18 was 2001. And I registered to vote back in like August because I wanted to make sure that I had everything lined up, ready to go, so that I could vote on what I think was like November 2nd that year. You don't have to actually be 18 as long as you're going to be 18 at the time of the election. There's this requirement in Pennsylvania. You have to be at least a resident here for 30 days prior to the election. And then you do have to have some identification, but they're even pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Flexible in terms of what you provide. So, they suggest a driver's license. Many of us have that. If you just have a basic Pennsylvania identification card that you would get through a DMV, you could use that. And something as simple as just simply the last 4 digits of your social security number is generally enough to register for the first time. So I always say to students, if you don't know your social security number by now by heart, it's probably a good thing to try to memorize. We're all required to memorize a lot of stuff, especially going through school, that maybe isn't overly important. Memorizing your social security number is something that you're going to use throughout your life, especially the older you get. So commit that to memory now. Now, if you're ready to sit down and register, again, there's a few ways that you can do it. The easiest way is I included here the web link to the Pennsylvania Department of State's website for online voter registration. So you simply bring that up and click on it. Let's see how this works with the screencast. All right. And you scroll down and you see you just fill out some very basic information. Are you a citizen? Yes. This is a new registration. You put in your birth date, gender, optional race, contact information, street address, municipality. There's a little bit of information here that's, again, it'll probably take you 5-10 minutes, but it is not overwhelmingly onerous, and there is no cost to it whatsoever. You certify you're not a robot, and you hit continue, and you're basically all done. Now, if you're somebody that chooses not to go the electronic route, you can access a handwritten version of this. And back in 2001, again, part of the reason why I try to be so proactive with myself was that back then you could only register via paper. And heck, even when I started teaching here at Shaler Area School District, every year I used to get somebody from the county that would swing by with a big stack of voter registration paperwork to hand out to my students each year, because that used to be the only way that you could register whatsoever. Well, if you want to go the more traditional route, you just basically print this out. You have to look up the office of the county that you live in, so Allegheny County, and you have to fill this out manually, print it out, and send it in. So again, if you're accessing this online, I don't know why somebody wouldn't just, fill it out online, but that's just my opinion on the matter. And then for the current election, again, if you're somebody that's going to be 18, in order to register and be able to vote for this upcoming presidential election, you have to have registered by October 19th. So you still have a little bit more than a month here to make this happen if you decide to do so. Now, one thing that it does ask you on the registration is it asks you to declare a party affiliation. So, are you Republican? Are you Democrat? Are you an independent? And you have no political party affiliation or kind of strong leanings. I believe that it also lists like 2 or 3 minor parties. I think it lists the Libertarian Party. I think it lists maybe like the Green Party. Why party affiliation matters whatsoever is that in Pennsylvania, we have what is called a closed primary. And you might have remembered learning this a little bit last year in civics. But basically, a closed primary means that during the primary elections during the spring, when the Republicans are trying to pick their Republican nominee, only members of that political party can vote in that primary. So, if you're somebody that wants to vote in primary elections, then I would definitely declare a party affiliation. If that's something that doesn't matter to you and you don't care, well, then, you don't have to declare a party affiliation. It really doesn't matter then. The other thing, too, about party affiliation is that you can change it at any time. Heck, I know that whenever I go to the DMV to renew my driver's license, one of the things that they always ask me is, do you want to change your party affiliation? And you can just do so at the same time that you get your license. Personally, and again, I always try in this class not to give any kind of political opinion or to key you anything in terms of my political beliefs whatsoever. But, in my life, so again, I registered in 2001, so I've been an active voter. I pretty much vote in every single election since for the past 19 years. There's been times that I've been a registered Republican. There's been times I've been a registered Democrat. There's been times I've been a registered independent. And a lot of that has depended on who is running, especially in the primary elections, and what races I feel very strongly about. So I remember, where I live, I live up in Pine Township, kind of in the Wexford area. And in this area, voter demographics are very heavily Republican. It's just the reality of the situation. A lot of registered Republicans that live up here, and so oftentimes, especially in more localized elections, so for, like, I don't know, our municipality supervisors, for example, for Pine Township, almost always you have maybe 4 or 5 Republicans running, but you oftentimes have like no Democratic nominee. So there's been times that I've registered Republican because I want to at least have some say, regardless of party, in who is going to ultimately represent me in local government. So again, just something to keep in mind. Once you register, then usually a few weeks later, you'll get a voter registration card. I tried finding one online. I couldn't really find a good example. And now that I'm looking at this one, it's a little bit more pixelized than I originally thought it was. But it's just a small little piece of paper. It'll say your name, and it'll say, your political party on it. It'll have your address. You'll have your signature on it. And, some people bring it to the polling site on election day, but you really don't need to. It's one of those things. It's good to have in case you need to somehow prove yourself. But generally, a driver's license can do that as much as any other form of identification. So you will get that sent to you. And then especially in this upcoming election, if you're somebody that is registered and you are planning on reporting to your polling place, I always say, and I do this in normal times, but always double check your polling place before you show up. Because sometimes they make changes. Sometimes, like, for instance, maybe they don't have enough polling place volunteers, and so they'll close a polling place and they'll consolidate with another site. Especially right now, because of all the COVID restrictions, they have really been reducing the number of potential polling sites statewide. So there's a website here. Again, I put it linked into the PowerPoint. All these links, by the way, I'll post the PowerPoint separately on this Google Classroom post. So if you want to go back and access these links, just pull it up, copy and paste out the link, or hold down Control and click on it, and it'll bring you right to the site. So all you do is you just put in your address or zip code or whatever, and you should be able to, let's see if I just put in my zip code without putting in my full address. What happens here now? I'd have to put my full address, but it'll tell you exactly what your polling site is, what your, election district is. So definitely a handy site there to check out before election day, for sure. Now, especially this year, and again, any election can be super important to you depending on, what you care about and who's running and what kind of the local or state or national politics are at the time. But this year especially, I think I keep saying to people that I think that the current, pandemic and living in kind of this new situation that we've all been living in for the past 5 or 6 months, I think has very much been a magnifier on many things in the world around us. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, I feel like, okay, if you're somebody that, is disorganized in normal times, I think that you're probably super disorganized now that you're required to do so much online and so much online learning. That's the case for, my son Ethan, who's in 5th grade, very disorganized kid normally, and he is just really struggling with staying organized when he's doing all web-based learning. Well, likewise, I think that the stresses that, the economic situation in our country, the amount of people that have been sick and have died, the regulations and restrictions, I think have all really brought, a magnified sense to debates surrounding a lot of these topics over the past few months. So, I say to people, if you're somebody that cares one way or the other, especially about some of these topics, you need to get registered to vote if you're 18, and make sure that your vote is counted and is heard, regardless of what part of the political spectrum you fall on. Also keep in mind and definitely look into the fact that in addition to president, there's going to be other, races on the ballot. And I think that what happens with a lot of people is that they're unaware of this, and they go into the ballot box, or they show up it's actually a little touch screen that you walk up to, and maybe like 75% of the people that are running are people you've never even heard of, or you don't even know what the heck they're running for in the first place. So it's worthwhile to do, 15, 20 minutes of research, ahead of time, so that you can make an informed decision. You don't want to vote for some guy who thinks something completely different than the way that you feel. So, things like if you live in like a borough or a town, you might have a mayor. Some municipalities don't. Council members or township supervisors, again, have a lot of say over local government. District attorneys, are very involved in criminal law, as are judges. And here in Pennsylvania, we elect both of these. Not every state elects these, but here in Pennsylvania, we elect our judges. We elect, our DAs, which decide whether or not to bring charges against people. School board. This is one that, I'd say like in probably an average school board election here in Shaler Area School District, there might be, 2,000 votes cast, maybe 3,000 votes cast for a candidate. I'm always amazed by how unaware people are of school board elections and school board politics, for the amount of power and say that those people have over people's lives. I mean, they set all the policies that run the school system. They also have the ability to set property tax rates. And if you want to get your parents riled up about something, talk to them about property tax rates, because especially in Shaler Area School District, that is something that really, really matters and can be very large. And then finally, state and federal representatives, and you'll see some of those on the ballot this year. Now, again, one kind of closing point, started off with a statistic. I'll kind of end this whole spiel with a statistic as well, is that here in the United States right now, we have far more voters under the age of 55 than we have voters over the age of 55. And yet, in terms of voter participation, we know that generally the younger a person is, the less likely they are to actually show up and vote. It's this huge disconnect. It should be majority population gets their way every time, and that's not always the case. I put up a statistic, 2016 presidential election year. Only 16% of voters from age 18 to 25 that were eligible actually voted. So that's like, what, 1 in 6, something like that? I remember watching a stand-up thing from Chris Rock a while back. If you're unfamiliar with Chris Rock, he's right there. And he threw out this, quote that I think really sums up maybe part of the reason why young people oftentimes don't vote. It says, "Oh, they don't want you to vote. If they did, they wouldn't vote on Tuesday in November. You ever throw a party on a Tuesday? No, because nobody would come." Well, most people on Tuesdays that are young are either at school or they're at work. And I think for a lot of people, the act of voting is a big hassle. Especially at presidential election time, you show up, you might have to wait in line for a while. It might be frustrating. And I think a lot of people just say, heck with it. I'm not doing it. Again, this kind of shows us, I'm sorry for the background noise. I'm sitting on my back deck right now. But again, it shows us, the number of old people versus young people, is very much flip-flopping over the past few years. So, if there's ever a time to have your voice heard in mass as young people, now would be that time. So again, I encourage you, if you can, get out there and vote. Now, to kind of transition from me talking and to you doing some level of exploring, one of the big topics this year especially, in the context of the upcoming election and in the context of COVID and all the CDC regulations, is voting by mail. So instead of physically showing up to a polling place, instead filling out a paper ballot, putting it, in an envelope and sending your vote in for somebody to count. So what I did was I took a part of a web assignment that I found on this website, iCivics.org. I'm not sure if you ever used that site before or not, but it's a really good, nonpartisan educational resource that, they have all these different activities and things to try to get people more aware. And so I took that and I tried to kind of condense it down some, streamline it, make it more step by step and easy to follow, all about voting by mail, and specifically voting by mail here in Pennsylvania and Allegheny County. So go ahead, check that out. I think it's pretty easy to follow. You kind of follow a link and then answer the questions. And of course, if you need any help whatsoever with that, please do not hesitate to reach out whatsoever. And I can answer your questions, or I can jump onto a Google Meet or something with you.